Yo, it's your boy Vegabomber, and welcome to Vegabomber Land. It's Easter 2017, and you know what that means. It means Easter movies, or movies that are geared towards the Easter crowd. So I did go see one, and it was a movie called A Case for Christ, which was actually taken from the book A Case for Christ, which was a book I read about 17, 20 years ago. It's about Lee Strobel, who was an award-winning investigative reporter who became the legal editor over there at the Chicago Tribune. Pretty smart guy, a guy who asks a lot of questions. And as he says in the movie and in life, it's all about the facts. So here's a book that he wrote, really, about him going and interviewing a bunch of theologians, both secular and believer or Christian theologians. Then he asked medical doctors, he asked psychologists, all of them, about the effect of what does it mean to believe in terms of being a believer in this faith called Christianity, because he was definitely a devout atheist, if you will. And so was his whole family, until that all changed one day. And that's what the movie's about. The movie's about the book. It's based on the book, but really the writers did something really intelligent. They said, you know what, if we do this long form movie, because that's what it would have had to be if you look at all the chapters in the book, it's just him having these interviews with all these people. They said we could do that, but that would be like a 6-hour documentary. So instead, what they decided to do was focus on the real story, the real drama, and that would be what happens when you have this happily married atheist couple that has a child and one on the way, and then all of a sudden one of them steps away from their beliefs. That would be a story, that would be juicy, and that's where the script actually goes. Now I know, Christian movies, and as a Christian I can tell you this, Christian movies usually have a tendency to be horrible with the acting, horrible with the script, super cheesy, and then really heavy-handed with the message. A lot of times Christian movies go one step forward with a message, because the message is usually a good message, but it backs up 2 steps in the way that it's presented or executed because, well, Christian movie. But just like Christian music got better, if you remember the stuff in the 80s wasn't nearly as good as the way it is now, then it means that the movie should do the same thing, and that's exactly what happens. This movie, A Case for Christ, which is based upon the book, but really focuses on the story, the humanization part of looking at, well, who was Lee Strobel? What was his family like? And how did he react when he found out that his wife just didn't feel the same way anymore? In this case, about their beliefs, about their worldview. And so I would have to say, this movie is a step in the right direction. I've seen plenty of Christian movies. They're absolutely horrible, and I think I could say that. They have great messages, of course, but usually, not as much fun to watch. But not this one. This one's in a step in the right direction. So let me tell you about that. So when I think about what was great about this film, well, first of all, I would say the acting really stood out to me, because Lee Strobel was played by a guy named Mike Vogel. And Mike Vogel, I remember from a movie called She's Out of Your League with Jay Baruchel. It was a funny dude buddy / rom-com type movie, but it's pretty funny if you haven't seen it. That's the last time I really saw him in a movie. But to see him now, his acting chops have definitely grown, because in this movie I believed him. I was convinced with that wig and that handlebar mustache, I was convinced that we were back in the 80s and that he was some version of Lee Strobel, although they don't look alike at all. I'd also say the cinematography was incredible in this film. I liked the shots of when they walked into the churches and the way they panned and they moved, and it didn't just feel like somebody was holding a camera and just following them. It backed up, it gave me some different views of just how some of these churches actually look on the inside. Some of these, like, I think there's one that was a Catholic church that was just absolutely beautiful on the inside. But I was glad to see that they were able to keep up with that. They were able to bring the level of cinematography up, so that's definitely a plus. And I kind of mentioned earlier, but the script was well written. It wasn't just cheesy, okay, we have to have this scene so that somebody can say this particular Bible verse, or we have to have that scene so that somebody can come in and say an old Christian bumper sticker proverb or something like that. It wasn't like that. The script was smart to focus on the family, because that's what it's all about. We all understand human experience. So if it would have just been an 8-hour-long documentary on every one of the interviews he had with these different people, could be kind of exciting if you're really thirsty in that way, but No, when I go sit down and go to a movie, I want to be taken out of my world and try to imagine something else, somebody else's world told through great direction, acting, and of course story. And this has that. And I would also say that the characterizations of both the Christians in this film and the atheists in this film, it wasn't so sharp-edged. It was basically left to say, hey, you follow the evidence, you come up with whatever your answers are. And it wasn't atheists are bad or Christians are all good. It wasn't anything like that at all, and I appreciated that because that's another thing about Christian movies that absolutely, well, just takes the fun out of it because you're just aware that's just not really how it works. I mean, Jesus was about love, so when you see things that counter that, you're just kind of like, that doesn't work for me. All right, so let's talk about what maybe didn't work in this film. And I would have to say there's not really a whole lot in this film that I didn't really like. This was really a jump up for pure flicks and for Christian films as a whole. So error-wise, I would say probably there was a couple of pacing errors, I thought. There was at least one moment, but there might have been at least one to maybe 2 or 3 moments where everything just kind of slowed down for a minute, and I feel like what was on screen wasn't necessary because we could have moved on and could have saved a few more minutes. Although, this movie isn't a very long movie. It's only an hour and 52 minutes. But there were a couple of moments where I thought the pacing kind of dragged a bit, and I'd say that. Another comment would also be that I thought for a moment that there were a couple of, not throughout the whole movie, but there towards the end, there seemed to be a couple of bad camera angle moments. So whenever the husband and wife are sitting there under the couch, and they're trying to shoot over his shoulder to show her face, and shoot over his shoulder to show her face, and shoot over her shoulder to show his face, if we get this right. It just seemed like when they tried to show her face, there were a couple of scenes where you could tell she wasn't really quite looking, or the angle wasn't quite right, but I could tell that there was a moment or two where you were aware of the over-shoulder shots, and there were a couple of them in there were kind of obvious that they were kind of misplaced, and I picked up on that. But pretty much, that is it. So, I gotta tell you, overall, this movie is definitely blowing up. And I think it's a huge step in the right direction. I love the fact that we've got a film like this out there, because I think this genre deserves to grow up and get better. You remember how horror movies used to be really bad, and look at the kind of horror movies we're getting now. And then, of course, all the sword and sandal flicks are going the other direction. They're just really getting bad. I think we've had some really great ones. But I think the Christian genre of movies is on the come up. So pay attention to it. Believer or non-believer, you can go watch this film and be good with it. In fact, I would tell my friends who maybe aren't believers, hey man, it's a good film, go check it out. Because I think they could see it. And again, I don't think the movie is there to try to change people's minds, but it is there to say, hey look, that thing you were thinking about, yeah, it happens over here too. And it happens over here too. And that's what's happening around you sometimes. So maybe this is a good peek into what other people see. Anyway, that's my thoughts on this movie. I wonder, have you seen the movie? And maybe you're not religious, or maybe you're not one of those people that goes to services, but if you are, or if you aren't, meet me in the comment section below. We'll talk a little bit about it. Tell me if you did see the movie, or tell me about ones you have seen that were absolutely horrible. And yeah, we'll meet in the comment section and talk about it. Yeah, I'm the Vegabomber, and I am out. Yep.